Okay, welcome everyone. My name's Alissa. I joined BGL in September of last year, so in the middle of the wonderful COVID pandemic lockdown saga. I joined BGL from an accounting firm where I specialised in the SMSF compliance processing. Now, the firm that I worked at, I was part of the migration from Simple Fund Desktop across to Simple Fund 360. So I'm going to go through and cover, I suppose, some tips and tricks that I picked up using Simple Fund 360, in particular, rolling out automation plans and just, I suppose, putting into practice features within the software. I completed my CA just before I decided that being an accountant wasn't for me. And decided BGL was where I wanted to work. So today's webinar, we're going to go through, as you guys have seen, best practice. Just do some housekeeping before we get into it. So the webinar is being recorded. Everyone that has registered to attend will receive an email with a link to the recording as well as the slides. There isn't going to be a great deal of info in the slides though. A lot of it's going to be more around live demo. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. We do have a number of staff online to help answer questions as we go through today's session. Now, what are we going to cover today? So, cannot reiterate it enough, starting with a plan. We'll go into the software and we'll have a look at the entity selection screen, the feed management screen, talk about some bank data automation, the setup of how to do that and the benefits of doing so, smart docs and transaction entry, the distribution tax automation, and the Workpapers within the software. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing the slides and I'm just going to jump in and I'm going to share the Simple Fund 360 software. So everyone should be able to see the Simple Fund 360 software now. Now, the first part that I mentioned was starting with a plan. So in terms of your migration or potential move across to Simple Fund 360, don't feel that you have to do everything all at once. It is a new software. It's going to be a new platform. So that is going to be a process in learning, getting the most out of your software and figuring out where everything is. I know that from my experience, I'd used Simple Fund Desktop for a couple of years before making the move across to 360. And as far as I was concerned, I was super fast, super efficient on desktop, and changing software wasn't going to make a difference. Ultimately, the move to 360 initially was tricky. You have to figure out where everything is and how to do everything all over again. But once you, I suppose, learn where everything is, the efficiencies that we were able to achieve and gain from using Simple Fund 360 were phenomenal in comparison to, I suppose, using another product. Now, in terms of the plan process, applies to the migration, also to automation. So if you're currently in a position where you're just using the software, but you're looking at how you can potentially automate or use some more features in the software, cannot reiterate enough, starting with a plan. Don't try and fixate or focus on everything all at once. Put it out into stages and plan what's going to happen with that, as well as planning for the potential, I suppose, outcome of what's going to happen once you do achieve or gain those efficiencies. So potential growth for your firm and the number of funds that you're looking after, that capacity could potentially increase, which is what happened in the firm that I worked at. Another great option to have within your firm is to have a Simple Fund 360 champion per se that does attend the training sessions, that is the person that the rest of the team can go to ask questions, to go through training, that knows how to do stuff. We had at our firm specific topics. So we had, one of the girls in the firm was the go-to person for all the T-bar reporting. She did all the research, all the studying on that, and she trained the rest of the team. Whereas my role in the firm was a lot more to do with the processing and the software side of things, which is where I train the team up. So having a champion within the firm can make the training and rollout process a lot smoother for you as well. Now, if I look at the software for a second, I'm just going to stop my video so you don't have to look at me squinting and getting really close to the screen while I'm going through the live demo, but I'll turn it back on later. Now, with the entity selection screen, you can see obviously this is our demo firm account. So we've got a lot of demo play around funds in here, but you can see these label section. Now, just as a quick trick, adding these labels can be really, really great for sorting your funds. As a perfect example, the firm I worked at, we used to add labels for the different financial planners so that when it got to a new financial year, we were just able to filter by this particular label, and we were able to send a bulk info request email to a financial planner asking for, you know, the 10 funds that financial planner looked after, and we needed the reports for the financial year for those 10 funds. Just a really quick way to, I suppose, group the data together so that you can send out those quick emails. Another great label that we've seen firms using is if you have multiple managers that are reviewing funds within your firm. It's another great way for them to be able to filter by the label, as well as, I suppose, if anyone had to look at from a workflow perspective, filtering by, you know, how many funds is this manager looking after versus this manager. So another great feature to implement and use. Now, these are free text areas within the software. So if you wanted to create a label, it could be, you know, digital signing, and you just hit enter and it will add that label. It's created that label for you. So you can make the labels anything that you want them to be. Now I will jump into our feed management screen. Now this is a newer screen, so I'm not sure if everyone will be aware or familiar with this screen at this stage. I want to go through a couple of different things in this screen. Now, the first one is that you have the option of viewing this on an entity level. So as an example, we're currently in the fund listed at the top. This is the entity summary for this particular fund. Now, it breaks it up into bank feeds, share data, wraps and platforms, which, as you all know, are the 3 different automation options that you have within Simple Fund 360. Now, you've also got the option of viewing your feed status on a global level, and this won't matter whether you're in a fund or not, you can still view it on a global level. So if I was to switch across over to this bank feeds global, you can see here all the funds in this demo subscription license are going to come up. Now, if I can give any tips in here, is when you are looking at the bank feed global screen, you will notice that you need to have the BSB and account numbers put in here. So this is a great, I suppose, note, like flag that you can put in, and at the start of a compliance job, potentially making sure you have all those details in for a fund. The reason I say this is it will give you information about whether or not there's a feed available for that particular bank account, and also give you the status of that particular feed. So, you know, whether it's supported, if it's not supported, but if you've also gone through the process of setting up the forms, if it's out with a client waiting for a signature, if it's with the bank organized, waiting for it to be activated, you know, if the feed is already operating, if it's been stopped for a reason, or if it needs any sort of attention. So I can't recommend enough making sure as part of a process you go through and add these BSB and account numbers so that you can track the status of the feed and if it's available or not. Another key point to note on this particular page here is that you are able to see the status of your subscription. So if you are concerned about the number of bank data packs that you have or share data packs, you can see that in here. You can also click on this arrow here for a breakup of it. Now, just a reminder, the bank data packs are per fund, not per bank account. So you attach one bank data pack to a fund. That fund could have 7 bank accounts. It's still only one bank data pack. So just something to keep in mind. It doesn't matter how many bank accounts are in the fund. It is only the one bank data pack assigned to a fund. Now, I will come across to share data here. Now, for clients that are using the share data currently, you will be aware that there are 2 elements to share data. So you have the BGL contract notes and you have the BGL registry data. The difference between the two Contract notes are going to attach the contract note to the transaction as it comes through into the software. So your buy or sell document will be attached to the transaction. The BGL registry data is the HIN or SRN that you manually put into your software with the postcode. And what it will do is at the end of a financial year or end of a quarter, it will give you a comparison of what data is in BGL and the holding balance you have in BGL versus what is being held on a registry data from Computershare, Link Market, or Boardroom. So they're the 3 providers that we currently integrate with. Now, share data is not necessarily going to be applicable for everyone. The clients that it's really good for are the ones that have their own CommSec accounts or NAB trading accounts. They manage their own buys and sells, and they're doing it themselves. The ones that have financial planners and are potentially using, wrap feeds, is when we come across to this wraps and platforms section. Now, the wraps and platforms was the last part of the automation project from the firm that I worked at that we looked at implementing, and I cannot stress enough, focus on one provider at a time. So as an example, we went with a provider that used NetWealth wrap feeds, and we looked at switching on all the funds that we looked after that had NetWealth wrap feed capability or in their funds, and we worked with one provider at a time. You will need the cooperation of the planner to switch data on from their side, and the process of setting up the wraps can be quite involved. So I would recommend, rather than overwhelming yourself with all of them at one go, do one at a time. Understand what data is coming into the software, where it's all going. There is a process of setting up some mapping when you set up the wraps and platforms, but the actual initial setup process, go through it with one planner at a time. That's the biggest recommendation that I can give to you. Now I'll come back to the bank data for a second. This would be the perfect place to start if you're looking at implementing sort of automation across your firm. Now, with the bank data, keep in mind, if you were to look at generating your forms today, they go out to the client, they come back, you upload them in the software, which I'll go through and show you. The data won't start flowing through until the bank has received the authority form. I think the exception to that is the Macquarie accounts, which you are able to backdate, but you will, if you are looking at setting up bank feeds, have obviously a period of a financial year where you're potentially missing data. So it's something to keep in mind for, I suppose, the 2022 financial year, if you're looking at setting up bank data throughout this current financial year, is you potentially be missing data for part of it, which will need to be entered in. Again, I'll go through and show you how to do that a little bit later on, but just something to keep in mind. Now, from experience, going through the automation project, bank feeds was probably the easiest automation that to explain to the client in terms of what we were getting, what we were asking them to sign and get on board with. The other thing I can't recommend highly enough is generating and including these forms when your client's already got a pen out ready to sign. The amount of, I suppose, buy-in that we had from our clients when they already were signing a collation, whether it be a tax return, financials, whatever, or they were coming in for a meeting, was much, much higher than if we sent a standalone email just with a bank authority form. Generally got questions. The client wasn't really interested in having to print something out to have to sign it, when they're doing us a favor by giving them access to this data. But yeah, can't reiterate enough. Include it with a collation or an engagement letter, something that's going out to the client where they're already getting a pen out to sign something. Obviously, they can still ask questions. You're not trying to hide the form, but just encouraging them to be signing while they're in a signing mood, including it there. Now, in terms of generating the actual form, if I come over to this supported section here, you can see this setup bar at the side, click a button at the side. If we come into setup, BSB and account numbers in here, Westpac, we're just going to print the form out. Once that form is printed out, we're obviously sending it to the client for signing. Now, if we come back into the software, I'm just going to come back over here and just bring it back to all. You can see here there's a button that says click here to upload signed authority forms. Now, all you need to do once you've received the signed form back from the client is upload it into the software. Our data services team will be on the lookout for these, and they will process this and get your bank feeds up and running. As I mentioned, they will start running from the day that the bank receives the authority form. So keep that in mind. You won't have historical data, except in the case of Macquarie. Macquarie can look at getting the historical data back. Now, you might ask why you would set up bank feeds. Now, the reason that we set up bank feeds in the firm that I worked at was the real-time data that it gave us access to. So obviously with the first financial year, you are going to be missing a period of data. However, once that project is done and underway, the next year you're going to see a full year worth of benefits. So we had clients that would call us up and want to know super balances in real time. You know, I've contributed money, I've withdrawn money. What's my available pension that I can withdraw now? The other thing that we found that it gave us the ability to do was it gives you an insight into what was occurring in the fund throughout the financial year. So if I jump back across to this home page, sure most of you have seen or realize that this is on here, but it's got this unmatched transactions thing. So as an example, if you happen to log in one day and you notice that one of your funds that might usually have 12 transactions for a year and potentially some journal entries that have to come through at the end of the year, all of a sudden has 150 transactions already, you can raise the question with the client in real time. The same can be said is if you happen to be looking through a fund and you notice that there's a huge withdrawal and the client is not in pension, it's an accumulation fund, it's probably a good opportunity to pick up the phone and have a conversation with the client about what's going on. Have they made an investment? Have they purchased a property? Also great because you're getting the information while it's fresh and they've got their hands on all of it, rather than waiting potentially 10 plus months to get information that you're having to then go back. They're having to go back and try and find. It just means everything's happening fresh. The other thing that we found really changed the way that we were processing a compliance job, as most of you can probably appreciate and would relate to. Compliance job would ordinarily start with an info request, depending on when the job's scheduled for, which quarter of the year it's scheduled for. A job would start with an info request. Now, ordinarily, those info requests go out and it's a pretty vague sort of information, a list of information. It could be, you know, please provide the bank accounts from 1 July to 30 June and invoices for any expenses that have been paid. With the bank feed set up, you have the ability to see what expenses have been paid. So you could potentially go through and you're doing your info request, you could process 90% of the data that's in there and you might have queries about 10% of the transactions. And that at that point, instead of sending an info request and then a subsequent query email following on from that info request, all of it can be covered in once. So your initial contact with the email, with the client could be an email saying, please provide bank statements for 1 July to 30 June. We noticed that on the 7th of March, there was a withdrawal of $150,000. Please provide the documents for that withdrawal. You know the specifics of the transaction. So it gives you a lot more insight. It also helps with quoting purposes. As an example, if you know that you've got a fund that had a really small budget because they normally would have 12 transactions for the year that could be interest plus a journal entry at the end of the year, and all of a sudden they've withdrawn $1 million and invested it with a financial planner, the budget for that job's going to change. So you're not sending out an engagement letter before you know what's actually happening in that fund. Okay, now coming away from that, I will go through, as I mentioned earlier, other ways to get your transactions in if you don't have that bank data. So once again, this is a demo file. It's not a real fund. And we are using demo accounts, our bank accounts and statements and everything. Now for Simple Fund desktop users, this transaction list screen is probably going to be the most familiar screen for those users because it does show you the debit and credit sides of each of the transactions. Now, by all means, if you want to enter data this way, you can enter data this way from a bank statement. What this gives you the ability to do is select your default bank account, and we'll automatically pre-populate that side of the transaction for you. So it's just a matter of, as you would in desktop, going through date, reference number, and your bank narration description, and then selecting the account. Now, if you are doing a repetitive journal, so as an example, monthly interest payments, go through, type in your dates. And if we were to go interest, if you came down here, and as I said, if it is a repetitive transaction, say it's $5, you can go through and click post and copy rather than just hitting post. Now, if I hit post and copy, what it does is it re-brings up the date, it populates a new reference number, but the description stays and the bank account and the selected account will stay the same. It's just a matter of updating the date and the amount per the next transaction. So it is a fast way to do repetitive journal entries. The same if you have a loan statement that potentially needs to be entered that's calculating monthly interest and possibly a repayment that's coming through. That post and copy button will save you a lot of time because it's obviously enabling you to just add, change the date, change the amount. So that's one way. Now, another way to get your data in is through the smart matching screen. Now, those that are familiar with Simple Fund 360 are probably quite familiar with this screen. Now, with this particular screen, you have a couple of different options. So firstly, importing a CSV. If the client's providing you with a CSV file and you're happy to continue using a CSV file, by all means, just come in here, import CSV, and it will allow you to map the date, the debit, the credit, the description. Just make sure if the CSV file has a balance column on it that you're clicking ignore for that column, because otherwise the system will get confused. Another option you have here is the data entry import or bank statements. Now, this one here, you've got a couple of options within this screen. You can go through and just manually type out the bank statement. So once again, this data entry spreadsheet would just be the bank statement side of the transaction. At this stage, you're not concerned about where the debit or credit for the other side of the transaction is going. As an example, if it was interest, you're not worrying about entering in the 2500 account at this stage. The other option you have within this screen is if the client is providing you with PDFs of the bank statement. If I come in here, just going to search. If the client's providing you with a PDF of the bank statement, you have the option of uploading it into this screen as well. We're just going to click confirm. Now, what the system does is it reads the PDF. What it will do is it will pre-populate the date, the debit and credit amounts and the descriptions for you. And it will show you the statement next to obviously what's been entered on the data entry spreadsheet. So as an example, if I wanted to come across over here and go, okay, the 5th to the 7th, where's that picking it from? You can see that it's highlighted across here. The 5th to the 7th, 2018, it's picked the amount. You can also select the amount. So pick the amount. We can see where that's come from, and we can see where the narration has come from. Same, you can actually jump in here and click on the same thing. We want to check to see where it's linking to. It's got across over here. Now, once you're happy with that, massive tip with using the Smart Docs feature is to double check your opening balance, your closing balance as per the bank statement. So you want to make sure both of these line up before you hit create. If there are any transactions that have been missed, it's worthwhile entering them into this spreadsheet, which you can manually go through and type transactions in. That's not an issue. You can add them into this spreadsheet before you hit create, and that will make sure that your closing balance matches to your bank statement and you've covered off any transactions that may have been missed. Now, with the alerts here, you can see the exclamation mark. The date on these statements, this is an older statement, so the date on this statement actually isn't in the current financial year that this fund is in. That's all that means. So if you, for example, you had a bank statement where you can see here, it goes past the 30th of June, you can actually come in and just delete these transactions off. If we're only wanting to import until the 30th of June, I can delete those and get rid of them. So that is covering off our transaction entry different ways. I'm just going to go and clear all of this out because I don't want to keep it all in here and just close that. Now you guys will know that once the data is in, it will come up under this list here, which is where we can do our smart matching from. I'm not going to go into great deal of detail with smart matching today. We'll save that for another day. But the other thing I was going to come and show you is I suppose the end of the financial year compliance process, where you're looking at the distributions. Now, again, Simple Fund desktop users will be familiar with the process of entering all the components. Now, in Simple Fund 360, you've got a couple of different options for how you can do that. This is the best screen I recommend you doing it from, as it gives you the ability to cover it all in once without having to search and go through everything. What it's going to do is it's going to pick the amounts that have been posted to this code. It also gives you the opportunity to come in and double check that if you had a distribution receivable that needed to be journaled in, that amount has been journaled in, as it gives you a breakup of these date amounts. Now, what you're looking at in this particular screen is this payment received and the net cash distribution amount. So this particular one down the bottom here has a lightning bolt next to it. Now, the lightning bolt indicates that this actually has system data. So what happens is BGL collects annual tax statements. So for everyone watching today, if there is a particular investment that you're noticing is not showing up in your distribution tax automation spreadsheet list, please feel free to send the annual tax statement that you have for that security through to distribution statements at bglcorp.com.au. The reason being, the more data that we have access to, the more that we can put into the software, the more that we can automate. So because of the way these security codes work, these are a global security code. So every single fund that you have that has in a holding of these units, it will filter across all of your funds. So with the lightning bolt here, if you wanted to generate the tax data, what it's going to do is it's going to populate. It knows how many unit balances, your unit balance is at the end of the year. It knows if there's a distribution opening balance receivable, closing balance receivable, and it's going to go through and look at the amounts. Now this one's going to be out, as I said, it's all dummy information, but you can see here that it's gone through and pre-populated all of these components for us. Now, once you're happy with them, what will happen is the variance here will be 0, obviously, when it's an actual real life fund. And the variance at the bottom here will also be 0. So there's 2 places for you to check it. Once it's all confirmed and you've got it correct, you'll just click over here and generate a mark as reviewed. Now, what that does is it moves it out of this incomplete section across to the reviewed section. So if I come back here, we've got the other one here. If you come across one like this, where we don't actually have the lightning bolt, so there is no system data for it, we can manually enter it ourselves. So if you come over to the right hand side, and we're going to click on the little cog, again you can see the variance at the top here is $50. So we're going to come through 50, variance is now 0, and we're going to click generate and mark as reviewed. And it's basically that simple. Now, keep in mind, I will just actually go through and show you. Mark is incomplete. Just to point out, when you guys are looking at these distributions, you can, when you're looking at your statements, this toggle here in Simple Fund 360 is the software knows that we're dealing with a super fund. So in terms of it calculating the 1/3 capital gain, you don't need to be worried about it doing that. And this 50% versus 1/3 is not how the software is going to calculate your capital gain. The software knows we're dealing with a super fund. What this toggle here is for the user's ease. Most annual tax statements that get issued are issued for individuals. They don't recognize the difference between super funds and individuals, so they generally give you the capital gains at 50%. So this toggle here just allows you to match what is showing on the annual tax statement that you have been provided with. It's nothing to do with what the system is going to calculate in the software. The system knows how to calculate it. This is purely for you to be able to enter in the data and for it to look like it does on the annual tax statement that you are sharing, you are looking at. That's what this toggle here is for, just something to be mindful of. Now, how are we going with questions? I'm just going to double check the questions for this. That's good. We've got no open questions for that. And the final part that I'm going to come through is to our work papers section. Now, I'm sure everyone's had a chance to have a look at the new report screen. This wasn't on my list of things, but I can quickly go over it if you want. Just as a particularly new addition to the features, everyone will know that when they hover over the reports tab, you've got these quick access reports. You now have the ability to customize which reports show up on here. As a perfect example, the firm I worked at, we preferred the detailed trial balance to the trial balance. You can now change that. So it's just a matter of coming in, searching for the report that you wanted to look for, and we're going to put a star on it. And clear everything, clear this. I'm just going to unstar that one. And save. So that's now been saved. It's going to refresh the screen. And you can now see that the detailed trial balance is available for us on that quick access list. You can basically add any single report that you would like to add to that quick access report list. Just keep in mind there's a maximum of 12 that will show up in the list, just based on the size of the screen. But it's a new feature that's only recently come out that I thought was worth sharing with you guys if you wanted to be able to customize what is available on that list. Now, what I was going to show you is the Workpapers module within Simple Fund 360. Obviously, a lot of firms prepare work papers in a lot of different ways, whether you're preparing PDF work paper files, paper work paper files, external work paper files, or if you were preparing work paper files within the software. Simple Fund 360 does allow you to prepare your work papers within the software. Now, it is free to use. There's no additional charge for using the work papers. And I'm just going to quickly go through, I suppose, what work papers is, how you can use it, and the options that you have for, I suppose, getting this information to an auditor. Now, the firm that I worked at only rolled this out just prior to me leaving. It was I suppose, the last efficiency that I introduced before leaving. But what this screen does is, firstly, it will give you the year that you're working in and the year across here. Now, be mindful, you can have multiple years of work papers set up at one time. The reason being, as an example, if you had a client that had bank feeds and you know that they've purchased a property in the 2022 financial year, you can create or generate the work papers for the 2022 financial year and start adding those documents that are coming through as and when they are coming through. So just be mindful that you're working in the correct year when you are working on these. Now, what the work papers module does is it gives you almost like a live trial balance, as an example, with obviously all your account codes and the current year balances. So if I was to jump into this account as an example, within the account, what it does is it gives you a breakup. So almost a high level GL of the investment, what income has been received. Now, automatically within this distribution received account, the supporting documents that are going to be attached to the work paper file are the distribution reconciliation report. So I'm just going to generate this report. Now, can I just get someone to put a thumbs up, or yep, you can see the screen, just so I make sure you guys can see it. Perfect, excellent, thanks guys. So this distribution reconciliation report is automatically included under this particular account code. So what happens is, this is a great way to come in and check your components, make sure everything's been allocated across and everything matches. Now, you also have the option of attaching your supporting documents within here. We also have a checklist, which you can edit and change these supporting documents, what comes as standard. Now, the supporting document that I've added up here is just my own work paper file or supporting document that I've attached. So it could be an annual tax statement, it could be a financial planners report that's been uploaded into the work paper. Now, what you can do as well is you can obviously change the status. So this one here has been marked as ready for review, because what that means is I was the preparer, Andrew is the reviewer for this particular file. Once the fund is all complete and all ready for review, what I can do is I can actually notify Andrew that this particular fund is ready for review. Now, for those that are using PDF work papers currently, you'll appreciate and understand the frustration that our preparers had at the firm I worked at when there was a change that needed to be made. You had to regenerate financials, you had to slot stuff back in, you had to replace bookmarks and ticks and stuff that was in there. With doing it this way, it's obviously all in the software. So as an example, if Andrew came in here and said, nope, not happy with that, not happy with the document, he could come back and say, needs rework. And then he'd be able to notify me once he's completed his review. So that's how that works in terms of going backwards and forwards. Down the bottom as well, you also have the option of uploading sort of permanent documents, and if there's any sort of pension documentation for pensions that have started throughout the financial year. Now, you do have the option of rolling these documents forward. So permanent documents, as an example, the deed can be rolled forward year on year. Now, at the end of the work paper process, once the manager signed off and said, yep, happy for these work papers, this file, happy for it to go to the auditors, ready to go, you have a couple of different options of what you can do. So this particular one I'm going to show just with one account, just to make it a little, I suppose, easy to demonstrate. But you can come over here and export the work papers. Now, what you can do from here is if you were sharing the fund with the auditor, you can invite the auditor in. They can come in here and they can click through everything if they want to in this Work Papers tab. With user invites, you do have the option of limiting access to what they can and can't see. So as an example, you could set up your auditor role just to be able to view this Work Papers page and open the documents. That's something that you can do. The other option you have is exporting the PDF, the work papers as a PDF file and uploading them. That's what our work papers, our auditors used to do. They used to use a platform called My Work Papers, and all our work paper files were in PDF, uploaded to them, and they then went through them. So if that was the case, you just come through into here, click on the work papers. Obviously, if you've selected all of them, it's going to do all of them. I'm just going to do the selected ones for this demonstration. Now, what it will generate for you, and if you come across to this bookmark section, you'll see what I mean when I say the bookmarking. It's going to generate the cover for you. Obviously going to give you the financial year you're in and the fund. If you come down then to the lead schedule. Now, this here would ordinarily consist of all your accounts. So 238, 239, etc. Because I've just selected the one account, it's only going to show me that particular account that I have selected. Be mindful that the status that is being marked is going to show on this lead schedule as well. So obviously I changed it just before to rework, just to show you guys. Just be mindful that that will show up on the lead schedule screen. Now, with these bookmarks, you can see here what it's done is it's individually bookmarked the schedule for that page, showing the amount. It's brought up the supporting documents that are going to be included, and it's also giving us a checklist of things that we can mark off. So the distribution reconciliation report, I obviously showed you before. We've then got the supporting document that I added. So as an example, this one has nothing to do with the fund. It's just been uploaded as an example, but you can see here that this account has the supporting document attached to it. Each of those has been bookmarked. So it's really easy for the auditor to be able to jump through and check these. So if we had all our work papers, they'd be able to then look at it and go, oh, I want to jump to the bank account and make sure the bank account's correct. They would again have this cover page, which is going to have the balance at 30 June. Underneath it, they're going to have the bank statement, which is going to have the balance as at 30 June. So it's a really, really easy way to manage your work papers within the software. The other thing with it is, as I said before, if you're going through a preparer and reviewer stage, you can do it all within the software. There's no need for the client, for the preparer to be regenerating, rebookmarking. You know, if they have had to do any sort of calculations or type anything over, it'll all be done there for them. So it's all in here. You can also add notes. How we go, I'm just going to double check the questions and make sure we're going okay. Oh, Damon's gone that one. Excellent. Now, I will show you one more thing that is sort of new because we've still got a little bit of time. I'll just show one more thing. Now, on the fund screen, now this fund dashboard screen again has recently had a bit of a makeover. Just worth noting on this particular screen, again, from a workflow perspective or management perspective, if you are looking after multiple funds with multiple managers potentially, you have the ability now with this note section here just to capture workflow statuses. So as an example, if this particular fund, we'd sent the info request out, however, we were waiting for the client to get back to us, you can add that note, which was, I suppose, going to eliminate the need for communication between the firm with, where's this fund at, what's going on, what's the status. You can record that status. Now, the other option with these notes is that you can actually pull notes from the work papers. So as an example, as I said before, if you were working on the work papers live in the current financial year, so we were currently working on the 2022 financial year, and you'd receive documents or you're waiting for documents, you can capture those notes in here. So if I was to come back into this particular account, coming down to the bottom, we've got a note. Now, this could be a client query, an internal query. So you could potentially, as the preparer, have a question for the manager. Do we know why they've done this, or if there's been a huge contribution received? It could be about, did we know that this was happening and where is it supposed to go? That note then will also show up on that fund dashboard screen. So again, if someone jumped into it, they could potentially see a note, hey, waiting for confirmation on what to do with this contribution before proceeding. Clients opening a new bank account, don't start before we get the new bank account, whatever it might be. Other than that, guys, we've come to the end and I've covered off everything. I know it's a bit of an information overload. Don't forget about the resources that we have available. So we do have the live chat that's available within the software. They are real people that are on the other side of that live chat. So it is generally a very quick way to get a response to a question if you get stuck on something. We've also got our learning channel, the YouTube channel, and of course the Knowledge Centre, which you can access within Simple Fund 360. Other than that, thanks everyone for your time today. I hope you all managed to pick up a tip or trick that's going to be able to be implemented in your firm and help you do things faster. We will keep the webinar open just until all the Q&As are finished, but thank you all for your attendance and I look forward to chatting with you all soon. Thanks, guys.